Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. What's something creepy that happened to you that you still occasionally think about to this day? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When I was 13, I complimented a girl my age and told her she was pretty, and she was. I didn't think anything about it at the time. But after that, she started stalking me, bothering my friends, all that stuff. She gave me the crazy eyes a few times and tried kissing me. Other stuff too, but we can skip that. Eventually, I told her that I appreciate her interest in me, but I wasn't really looking for a girlfriend. No offense. I even apologized if I gave her the wrong idea. She freaked out, hit my chest a few times, and even shouted, "You have no idea who you're effing with." She wasn't just talking trash. Turns out, I didn't know who I was effing with. It was a small town, and my parents knew her family. My parents also knew that her father had just gotten out of prison following a conviction for murder. They nearly panicked when they found out who I'd pissed off. The incident made me less likely to flirt with girls for a pretty long time. I was walking down the street and I heard footsteps running up behind me. I turned around and a man threw a blanket at my head. I dodged the blanket and ran into the street and turned around yelling. The man just stood there looking at me, and he had a cord in his hand. I ran to my car and called the cops, but they didn't do anything. The man was homeless and lived in a camp right next to my work, so I basically pass his house every day. I haven't seen him again, but I get really freaked out if I hear someone running up behind me now. I ghosted this guy that did my taxes for a few years. He was such a creep and really gross. I was like, I'll do my own taxes. Then he shows up at my apartment building I used to live at, the address that was listed on my taxes the last time I did them with him. I know this because my mom lives there now and was walking her dog and says a man in a full-length trench coat was there. She said hello to him a few times and got a glimpse of his face before he turned and literally ran into the woods. It was raining out too. When my mom told me I thought she was going to go, then I woke up. No, Larry, the creepy tax guy, showed up to my old place of residency in a trench coat on a rainy night, then took off into the woods. Like, what the hell? When I was little, maybe 5 or 6 years, my extended family was over and we were outside playing badminton. It was toward the end of the day and starting to get dark and a little bit chilly. I was snuggled up with my mom in a double camping chair and was just chilling and watching my family play. While I was sitting there, I noticed something up in the mountain from my backyard. It was a dark, tall figure just peering behind a tree. It was looking from behind the tree, almost as if it were hiding and just taking a peek. I don't remember any significant features, but I still remember that night and everything that was going on, and that I saw this thing peeking from behind the tree. Super weird. This was in Washington State, and I've always thought of it as being Bigfoot or something. When I was in middle school, my dad's stepmother, Charlotte, got really into ghost hunting. It was before all the TV shows and such. It consisted of going to a supposedly haunted place at night, taking pictures with digital cameras and looking at them later. There were stories of her floppy disks being destroyed, her being followed home by spirits, and more. She was full of stories. But some of the pictures were interesting and actually captured something, and it was a fun bonding experience. Anyway, my mom, Charlotte, dad's stepmom, my aunt Crystal, cousin Maria, and myself all went ghost hunting at this supposedly haunted cemetery in my town. It's the oldest in my area and has a lot of stories. The cemetery also used to be next door to an old Catholic orphanage, which had a lot of haunting stories as well. I say used to because the orphanage was torn down several years ago. So we're talking and walking through the cemetery, taking pictures, reading headstones, discussing the people, and Charlotte is sharing stories about this cemetery. Many of them, I'm just rolling my eyes as I hear about the spirits being seen and experienced here. Well, Aunt Crystal, Maria, and myself all came to a wall and decided to sit. As we're sitting, my mom and Charlotte stand next to us and start talking. As we're talking, the next thing I know, I'm about 5 to 6 feet out away from the wall, still in my seated position, as well as Maria and my aunt. I turned to look thinking the wall had fallen, and so I jumped. I tried so hard to rationalize it, but the wall was standing. Maria and my aunt start running and screaming. I begin to realize how cold I am and start spinning and holding my butt because it's freezing. As we calm down and talk to Charlotte and my mom, they mention that it all happened in a flash and took them by surprise as well. To this day, I still don't fully know what happened, but my daughter's daycare is in between the cemetery and the ground the orphanage used to occupy, so I pass the cemetery every day and still try to figure it out. Just yesterday, I looked to see if perhaps that the wall had fallen by now, thinking that may help explain it, but it's still standing straight up. We've always had weird things in our house, small stuff, and we can't explain it. Well, the entrance to our attic is in my room, and it's the only entrance in there. Me and my mom are both night owls and seem to stay up pretty late sometimes. One night I'd gone to bed early, but woke up to the sound of 3 claps coming from our attic at 3 a.m. I told my parents about this in the morning, and they just kind of laughed and shrugged it off. They didn't really believe me. Next night comes around, and my mom was awake when it happened again. 3 claps at 3 a.m. It woke me up that night too, but paranormal things like that I just typically shrug off, and it keeps happening, kind of telling whatever it is that I don't really care, just don't hurt me, lol. So I ended up going right back to sleep. My mom told me she heard it too the second night and believed me then. We store all of our holiday things up there, so I'm in the attic fairly often. Nobody's living up there. To this day, we talk about it and still can't explain it. Never happened other than those 2 nights, and nothing else has happened since then. Maybe it was telling us goodbye or something. I don't know. Well, I'm not going to be the one to tell her, but generally, if you hear some type of clapping for 3 a.m. in your house and you live with your parents, might not be a ghost. When I was about 9 or 10 years old, my grandma took me to my cousin's Saturday football game. I left my Game Boy in the truck and asked her to come with me to get it. She told me no, and that I would be fine to get it myself. I said okay and walked to the parking lot. I grabbed my Game Boy from the truck, and as soon as I closed the door to the truck and turned around, there was a tall, middle-aged man standing about 20 feet from me staring at me. I looked at him for a few seconds, and then he raised his right hand and started shaking his pointer finger side to side in the no, no, no fashion, while he shook his head and clicked his tongue. After he did that, he lunged and started chasing me. I weaved in and out of cars until I found an opening in the fence that lined the parking lot. I ran back to the game and told my grandma while hysterically crying. Her and a few football dads went to the parking lot and couldn't find the man. I don't even want to wonder what would have happened to me if that man had caught me. I still think about it, unfortunately. Lots of weird things have always happened to me. I always attract animals. It doesn't seem to matter what I'm doing. I always seem to end up with a friend. It ranges from dogs and cats to bees. I'm a particular favorite with them, which is great as I adore them and love rescuing them and helping them recover, and spiders. Lately, though, it's been birds, which is a kind of new one for me. My family and friends tease me for being a witch right from when I was a little kid. Then there'd be an animal or two tagging behind me on the way home from school. I also pick up on other people's energy really easily. Oh boy. I went to a house to help a woman who was injured with her personal cares. Really lovely lady. But anytime I went anywhere near her, I got really dizzy, and my head was filled with static. I found out later that she has really severe schizophrenia. I lived with my in-laws for a while our son was quite young. Their house was built in the early 1900s and definitely had more than a couple of ghosts. They were mostly friendly, just a little bit naughty. They'd hide things from me, which I would spend ages looking for. After a while, I'd scold them and tell them to put the item back. When I'd turn around, what I'd been looking for would be there. They'd do things like lock you out of the house if you were outside, or sometimes just hit some keys on the piano over and over. There was one soul in there that wasn't nice, though. I'd always know when he was around, as this great big goofy golden retriever would refuse to come in the house and just bark and growl, and his whole body would be trembling. My son would get upset about the scary mean man in his room and refuse to sleep in there. My mother-in-law would see and hear them too, and to this day, anytime I stay there, there's normally some kind of interaction with them. About a decade ago, my boyfriend, now husband, and I went up to the California coast to a secluded hotel. It was forest meets the ocean, 20 minutes down a 2-lane curvy highway. The resort was on one end of the road, and a small hike to the meditation maze was on the other. We settled into our room and noticed they left a flashlight, advising to bring it on the hike. We run across the highway and make it into the forest, where a small creek was the only thing making sound. We walk over the small stones and begin our meditation maze from the center. Left, right, turn, going in circles, and the sun is getting so low, we will definitely need the flashlight to get back at this point, but continue looking down and following the path the small stones made. I broke through the circle and whispered into my boyfriend's ear, "Leave." As soon as we were away from the maze, I let him know I had peeked up during the maze because I saw a bag, looked higher up, and saw a man in the trees watching us. I've been to this hotel a couple times before. I've even had something else creepy happen there, but this was my last stay. When I was 12, I'm 35 now, my mom worked until 11 p.m., and my sister, who was 15, was constantly with her friends. I had just made some new friends from school that lived about 2.5 miles away. On this particular day, I had taken the bus to their neighborhood and hung out most of the night since it beat sitting at home alone, since my sister typically hung with her friends most of the night too. Around 9 p.m., I started walking home. The route home was on Main Street, so I didn't get a chance to stop to use the bathroom, and by the time I got home, I had to go bad. When I walked into the house, all the lights were off, which was pretty typical. I walked up the stairs, and my bedroom light was the only light on in the entire house. It was weird, but I had to pee badly, so I didn't think too deeply into it. As I got up the stairs, I had to walk past my bedroom to get to the bathroom. There I saw my sister standing in my room, staring out of the window, wearing my white and orange polo shirt. This was weird for a few reasons. One, she never wore my clothes before. Two, the window was just an ally in my neighbor's house. What would she be staring at? But having to pee so badly and being in the moment, I didn't consider any of this. As I was in the bathroom peeing, I was yelling at her, "Don't wear my clothes anymore." No reply. I go back in my room looking to argue, and she's gone. No one was there. At that point, it became very clear that I was alone in the dark in the house. At that point, I ran as fast as I could downstairs and to my next-door neighbor's house and asked if I could stay there for an hour until my mom got home. When I got in their house, I asked to use their phone and call my sister's best friend's house, this was the late 90s, and asked if I could talk to her. Sure enough, she got on the phone and was there all night. This haunts me to this day. So many questions. Why? Why my shirt? Why my sister? Why that day? I had a few odd things happen. When I was a student nurse, I was caring for a patient who was blind in a side room on the ward. The room had its own toilet, with a door opening into the room. We heard someone walk around the toilet and flush it, but no one was there. The patient heard it as well. While in the same hospital on a night shift, I also had an odd experience. All the heart rate monitors in the recovery area came on and began to give readouts like there were patients attached to them. While working for a mental health team, I had a phone call from a patient. The call was very difficult to hear, and there appeared to be static in the background. I managed to get her details before the call ended, looked her up in the system, and she'd been dead for 5 years. Well, when I was 17, I went to a mental hospital as a patient. I arrived really early in the morning and had spent all night in an ambulance, so the nurses let me sleep since the main doctor wasn't there yet. It wouldn't be for a few hours to officially check me in. During the day, no patients were allowed in the dorms, and the nurses basically assured me no one would bother me while sleeping, but they'd look into the room every 15 minutes as required when someone was in a dorm. Anyway, I had a hard time sleeping, but right before I was actually able to, someone grabbed my shoulder and started shaking me. I was pretty pissed off and yelled, "What?" really loudly, but I kept my eyes closed because I really wanted to sleep and I struggled with it. They didn't stop shaking me, so I sat up and was basically ready to argue, but no one was there. So I ran out into the hallway to see if they had run out so I could tell them to fuck off, but no one was in the hallway, and all the nurses told me no one had gone in. But yeah, I just wonder what or who it was, or if it was just me seeing shit, but that doesn't really make sense to me either since I felt it.